A school board meeting unlike most. Jacksonville's district leaders dealing with a trio of topics, and at least 100 people wanted their voices heard. We'll hear from the Duval County Schools Board Chair today. The U.S. Senate becomes complete following the outcome in Georgia's runoff election. What does it mean for Congress that Senator Warnock is reelected? And what does that mean for 2024? We'll explore in our Hand on Government segments next on This Week in Jacksonville. And thank you for joining us today. After an eventful week for the largest local school district, the Duval County School Board approved an updated set of sex education lessons for middle and high schoolers. That vote came after hours of discussion during this week's board meeting. More than 100 people waited in line. They wanted to speak during public comment. And the district had to change its curriculum in September because of a new state law that changed how sex ed is taught in Florida. As some parents said, the new rules still don't do enough to keep parents informed on conversations involving sex at school. Some students spoke out in support of the new curriculum.
Our generation is your next future and our next future as a whole. So teaching us to be healthy, to love and accept ourselves should be paramount to teaching us, putting us in positions in happy environments.
Where is the line that differentiates this behavior from grooming for our children? As a parent, I want to know who are the people speaking into our children's lives about such intimate matters.
And you can see a full rundown of what each grade will be taught under the new plan. It's on our website, news4jax.com. Any parent can still opt their student out of the district's sex education curriculum. And so joining us now in studio, Dr. Kelly Coker, Duval County Schools Board Chair. And this is actually our first time to get to meet face to face. Thank you so much for coming in and visiting with us a little bit. So how would you describe what we saw in that board meeting this last Tuesday with so many people passionate about expressing themselves and addressing the topics that you had?
Well, as a board, we are always appreciative of the public coming in and letting us know where we need to be as a board. We serve a constituency in Jacksonville. I serve District 1, but also everyone else throughout the county. And we want to hear those voices. And we've been fortunate that parents have joined in and let us know their thoughts on what they want for their children. And we did actually approve. And we're required by the state of Florida to approve a comprehensive sexual education program every year. All of the 67 counties, Duval no exception, has to approve that. This was done after much discussion. It was done after making sure those materials were available to the public and to the parents, and after hearing their feedback as well. A majority of the board voted for this item.
So what are the changes, and then were those changes difficult to make in terms of this reproductive health curriculum?
No, you know, we're fortunate in the state of Florida. The Tallahassee lets us know what standards we're supposed to teach, and we as a school board are going to make sure that we cover those standards as we're supposed to. One of the big changes that occurred for us, though, was we used the state-adopted textbook, and there are a few standards that we needed some additional materials to cover the standards that are required. We used to use a different set of material. We are now using the supplemental material that goes along with the state-adopted textbook. But now you mentioned something earlier about parent opting out. That's one of the biggest changes that I want to make sure that I let the public know about. So it's one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you today. In the past, we sent a letter home to parents, and we said, if you would like to opt your child out of the sensitive conversation, check a box here, sign it here. Well, I have a child who graduated from Duval County Public Schools. When she was 13 or 14 years old, sometimes those forms made it home. Sometimes they ended up in the bottom of the locker or the bottom of the backpack. As a board, we were very clear that these topics are really sensitive in nature, and we want to make sure our parents really do get the option to opt out. So we've moved that opt out into an electronic portal. It's the parent portal that our parents use to look at grades, attendance, discipline. And so now they're going to be able to be notified when their child's in the course, when they're going to be taught this sensitive information, and they'll be able to literally check an electronic box and send that information to the school, and the school will know exactly whether their child should participate in these lessons or not. And as a former working mom, I'm just so appreciative of that, because I didn't have time to run that form to the school. If I can sit at home at night and check that little box, we're good. So I want parents to be expecting and be ready to look in the portal and let us know whether their children should be a part of this.
This is a new role for you as board chair. This was your first meeting leading the board as chair. But your background is in schools as a teacher, an educator, an administrator, a principal at a couple of different schools, I guess assistant superintendent.
Correct.
How do you process the comments that you were getting? Lots and lots of feedback, and some of it not very supportive of what the board was trying to do.
Sure. You know, I believe in something called civil discourse. And civil discourse is when we come together, we share our thoughts. Sometimes they're opposing, sometimes they're the same. And then what we try to do as a board is try to hit where we believe the mark is for the majority of our parents in our district. The really good news with sexual education in Duval County, though, is, again, that opt-out piece is there for any parent who doesn't want their child to participate in any lessons that are sensitive in nature. I appreciate the commentary. I'll be honest with you, there are people that gave opposing views to mine that I learned from, and there's nothing wrong with that. That helps us all to evolve and be better at our jobs as elected officials.
Let me shift the topic just a little bit. Superintendent Dr. Diana Green spent about 10 minutes during the meeting explaining the end of the district's contract with longtime partner Jasmine. Do you agree with that change, or why that change was made?
So as the school board member from District 1, yes, it was a hard decision for her, and it's a hard decision in terms of the fact that we're severing ties. But there was a simple reality that Jasmine, unfortunately, posted an item on social media that we know some 13, 14-year-olds, it was graphic in nature, should not have been exposed to. And not only that, it invited them to come to the Jasmine campus and participate in an activity that we would certainly never have happen on our campuses. And to be a partner with us, you have to do activities that would be appropriate on our campus. As I say that, though, I want to make sure I make clear that should not erase. They've been partners of us since 2013. They have been tremendous in providing mental health resources, support to families that are dealing with these issues, and we want to make sure we don't erase the good work that they have done. This was just a moment in time that we had to make a difficult decision.
And I heard Dr. Green mention, hey, some of the resources that are available through Jasmine will still be available. What kind of resources are we talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. We recognize that the LGBTQ plus community, we want to support them. We want to lift them. We want to love them. We want to make sure they know that we value them, whether they're a teacher in our district, whether they're a staff member in our district, a parent in our district, or a child in our district. So we are going to continue to provide full support there. We're going to lean into our relationship with full service schools that provide mental and physical health already with parent consent. We're going to lean into our relationship with with our health department here locally. We also are so lucky in Jacksonville that we have the University of North Florida, the College of Health there, and we'll be leaning into our relationship with them as well. They've been great partners in this. And then we'll look and see on the landscape, are there more partners we need to bring in? We also, Dr. Green, and she laid this out on Tuesday night as well, we are going to go meet district leaders, and she's invited the board to attend. As the board chair, I plan to attend some of these, to go meet with what we call our GSAs. Those are our Gay Straight Alliance clubs that are in our secondary schools. Those are student-led.
There are a couple dozen of them, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And they're led by our students, but we do have sponsors that are teachers and community members that help support them, and we have parents that help support them. We're going to go, after we get started with these layers of support, we're going to go listen to them and say, what's missing? What more do you need? So that we make sure that we truly care for the LGBTQ plus community. Again, we love them, we support them, and that doesn't change in this.
Yeah. Dr. Coker, I appreciate it. Like I mentioned, great time. First time we get to meet and talk through things. I hope you'll be back with us. As we
I would love that. And thank you for letting us communicate some of the things that happened this week.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, well, stay with us. Our monthly segment, Hand on Government, that's just 3 minutes away. Chris Hand joins us as we look at the impact you may not have considered following the U.S. Senate runoff election in Georgia. That's next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
And thanks for staying with us. Chris Hand is here, government law attorney, and our Hand on Government segment. I love when we get to talk about things. So we're going to talk federal and state and local. And let's start here. We had spoken about the importance of the U.S. Senate runoff election in Georgia. And so now we know Raphael Warnock gets his first full 6-year term. Chris, what's the implication for the new Congress as it begins in just a month from now?
Well, Kent, this runoff election, of course, didn't have exactly the same drama that the runoff in January 2021 did, because, of course, that determined control of the U.S. Senate. Control had already been determined in the November election, but this was still a very important election because it was going to decide whether Democrats had a 51-49 majority in the new Senate or whether it would be tied 50-50 again with Vice President Harris casting the tie-breaking vote. Senator Warnock won re-election by about 3 percentage points over Republican Herschel Walker. And so now Democrats are firmly in control of the United States Senate. They can have majorities on U.S. Senate committees. They have subpoena power, and now they have some flexibility. If they are passing votes that are important to the party or to President Biden, they don't have to have every Democrat like they did over the last 2 years. They've now got some flexibility in that regard. So,
two names stick out to me on that. Sure. In the past, Democrats like Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema were not necessarily with the party line vote there.
Well, I think the happiest U.S. Senator about the result earlier last week was Raphael Warnock. In a very close second place were the two senators that you just named, because they may now have some flexibility as the governing process goes forward. So it does have a significant impact on the Senate. Of course, now as a result of the elections, the House, the Republicans have taken a narrow majority in the House of Representatives. That body is now working through its leadership elections to determine who's going to be Speaker and what that's going to look like come January. So we will have a Congress where one House is controlled by one party, one House is controlled by another, and of course President Biden in the White House. So there'll have to be some bipartisan collaboration over the next 2 years in order to make sure key priorities pass.
Your view in general, is that good for America? Is that good for the governing process when there has to be give and take because those houses are controlled by different parties?
Well, I think bipartisanship can certainly be good if everybody practices it. And that's always the key question, regardless of who's in power. Is there a good faith bipartisan exchange? And we'll have to watch and see, Kent, if that's what happens over the course of the next 2 years. And we just don't know that yet because we don't know what the ultimate House leadership's going to look like. We don't know how it's going to be, of course, a new House leadership and a new House leadership on the Democratic side as well, because Speaker Nancy Pelosi is no longer going to be in her leadership position. Right. So I think it's going to take a little while to understand how those dynamics work between a Republican-controlled House, one with a very narrow majority, a Democratic-controlled Senate, also with a very narrow majority, and President Biden at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. I think we'll know better after the first couple of months what is that working relationship going to look like.
Before we run out of time here, just on that Senate race there in Georgia, Republicans seemed pretty divided on Herschel Walker, the lieutenant governor there in Georgia, even saying he couldn't support his party's nominee. Great running back, football hero in Georgia, but in some ways criticized as a poor candidate. How did that factor into the results that we saw here last week?
Well, I think there were a variety of factors that propelled Senator Warnock to his reelection. One, his campaign made a very concerted effort to reach out to NPA, no party affiliation voters, Republican-leaning voters, tried to cross the aisle, and you saw that in a lot of his results, particularly compared to the November 1st election. There's also been a strong Democratic turnout machine built in the state of Georgia in recent years, and that had an impact. But as you say, there was more division on the Republican side. There were certainly some controversies surrounding Herschel Walker. Former President Trump had inserted himself into the race by endorsing Walker in the primary. Some of the controversies there may have impacted that candidate as well. But at the end of the day, I think the Warnock campaign took good advantage of its own turnout operation, certainly, overinvested, in fact, was the only candidate to invest in this media market here in Jacksonville, which includes 6 Georgia counties, and then also, again, had that concerted outreach to NPAs and Republican-leaning voters.
You mentioned former President Trump. He did not campaign in Georgia in the most recent stretch of time here with Herschel Walker, but Senator Warnock did get in-person support from President Biden, former President Obama. At what level does that maybe change our view on what's going to happen in the run for 2024? Is there a connection?
Well, I think very much. I think what it does is show the new importance of the state of Georgia. Georgia is now very much the swing state that Florida used to be. And I think, we're maybe now at a point where so goes Georgia, so goes the nation in terms of the presidential election. You see that, Kent, not only in this result, but look, Democrats are considering having their 2024 political convention in Atlanta. It's one of the finalists for that. And I think you're going to see Senator Warnock's name mentioned more on the national stage. Immediately after his victory, there began to be some suggestion that maybe he is a future presidential candidate himself or a future vice presidential candidate. So Georgia has really become, in many ways, the center of the political universe, much like Florida used to be.
How about that? All right, so that's kind of the federal view. When we come back, we're going to look at state and local issues as we continue our Hand on Government segment. Florida's legislature gets started early with a special session that begins tomorrow. We'll explain what lawmakers are trying to accomplish in that. That's next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
Chris Hand is with us once again in a segment we call Hand on Government. Chris has been involved at every level, federal, state, local. So let's talk state politics here and help us understand. State lawmakers have called for a special legislative session starting this week, and it's about property insurance. They just did this in the spring, so it seems like the same topic. Are they trying to accomplish something different this time?
Well, Kent, anyone who lives in the state of Florida and owns a home here knows that we're in the midst of a full-blown property insurance crisis. If you are a homeowner, you've probably seen that your insurance premiums have gone up maybe by as much as a third over the course of the past year, or your insurer is no longer providing coverage, and you've had to go into the state-run Citizens Property Insurance Corporation. Like I mentioned, we've had multiple insurers who've actually pulled out of the state, a number of others who have gone insolvent. So the legislature's coming together to try and address what is one of the biggest pocketbook issues that Floridians are facing right now. Will they be able to insure their homes? And if so, how much is it going to cost?
Yeah, I'm full transparency. Yeah, I'm one of those. I got that notice last spring. Sir, we're not insuring in your part of the country anymore. We're not in Florida. So as we go into this, what's the connection to what lawmakers are trying to do right now and even the most recent hurricanes, Ian and Nicole, both creating lots of damage and insurance claims, clearly?
Well, again, I think that's one of the big issues. I mean, this has been a problem all year, but it was a problem that was exacerbated by something that we've become accustomed to here in Florida, which is very violent tropical weather that creates high winds and thus has an impact on windstorm insurance, where claims had to be paid. Of course, very unfortunately, lots of people around the state, particularly in Southwest Florida, were impacted by Hurricane Ian. And of course, folks on the east coast of Florida impacted by Hurricane Nicole. That has created a bunch of new claims, a bunch of new pressures on insurance companies to pay those claims, and I think is why you're seeing the legislature come back in session right at the end of the year to try and deal with those issues.
I've heard people say, well, what happened the last time, and as a homeowner, when do I feel the impact? Is this something, it seems like something that is going to take a long time for homeowners to feel the impact of any changes that the lawmakers come up with?
Well, it will take time, and hopefully we'll have some of those answers, Kent, as the legislature gets into special session. Right now, as of the time of this conversation, they have not yet released what the package of potential reforms could be. There have been a variety of suggestions. One could be using some of the reserves the state has accumulated in recent years to try and help lower the risk for insurance companies and thus lower premiums. There's been some suggestion of litigation reform, trying to reduce the number of lawsuits that are involved in paying insurance claims, and also some reforms to what's called assignment of benefits. When you assign your benefits to a contractor who they then work with the insurance company, we just don't know yet, but we've been told by the legislative leadership that it will be a comprehensive package of reforms, and we'll have to see at the end of this week what that package ultimately looks like.
So let's shift to a little bit more local focus, Chris. The local nonprofit Changing Homelessness received this big infusion of cash from Jeff Bezos, a grant of $2.5 million from the Amazon Founders Day One Families Fund. Nonprofit mission like this is going to get a big boost when you get $2.5 million, right?
Well, I think that's a huge boost, and first of all, congratulations to Dawn Gilman and her team at Changing Homelessness for this grant and for what it's going to do to their programs. So they focus on a variety of different issues, including trying to end veteran homelessness and try and, again, place other folks. Remember, they've identified, just in terms of the folks who have signed up for services, there are nearly 3,500 homeless people in the city of Jacksonville. I think there's certainly a perception that's gotten worse during some of the economic challenges of the last 2 years and during the COVID period. But I think also speaks to a larger issue, which is not just Jacksonville, but all of Florida, Kent, has a major affordable housing challenge. The City Council's Special Quality of Life Committee just finished meeting and issued their draft report. One of the things they noted that just in the last 2 decades, Jacksonville's accumulated a nearly 35,000 affordable housing unit gap in this community.
What's the gap mean? They need 35,000 more affordable living spaces.
Correct, that's right. That people are generally paying more than economists and others feel like they should for housing. And so it's created that real deficit in affordable housing in this community. And that committee recommended a variety of solutions, and there are, of course, other solutions out there as well. But we talked about property insurance and that crisis. Following right on its heels, and I think of similar magnitude, is an affordable housing crisis. And of course, both share a common root. They affect where we live and how we live.
Well, and so Jacksonville isn't the only community dealing with this issue. St. Johns County dealing with it this week. As a matter of fact, a new affordable housing complex welcoming residents in for the first time this last week. The San Marcos Heights complex opening, and residents there are able to pay just about $1,000 or less for an apartment, a complex with a variety of floor plans. It goes from 1 to 3 bedrooms. And to qualify, you have to meet a maximum income standard. But, Chris, this is something that we need throughout all our, and about a minute left in our show, but we need this all over our region, right?
Affordable housing is infrastructure. We've heard a lot about infrastructure, and people often think about it, Ken, as streets and drainage and sewage and those sorts of things, and that all is very important. But when you think about it, in many ways, the centerpiece of the American economy is the home. And I think what most creates long-term economic sustainability is having people in homes, having home ownership. And here in Florida, that's become an increasing challenge because of how expensive. Jacksonville is one of the top 10 markets in terms of rents and the cost of rents in the country. That's why the City Council, and I think and others, are starting to focus on this problem so that people can have homes where they can afford to live.
Need to make that happen. Chris Hand, thanks so much. Our Hand on Government segment, something we do once a month with Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
So coming up, Mary Kelly Palka stepping aside from her leadership role at the Florida Times Union. She joins us next week. Plus, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office achievers. They're breaking glass ceilings and leading JSO forward. Chiefs Jamie Eason and Jennifer Short. They are here with us next time, too. This Week in Jacksonville airs each Sunday morning at this time. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching on air on Channel 4 and the CW17, online at news4jax.com, or streaming on News4Jax Plus.
See why every day more people are choosing News4Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.